Share, we are live and the meeting.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone here and those joining us online, whether it be live or streaming it at a later date. Welcome to tonight's audit committee. This is the first one of the new administrative year and my first in the role of chair. We start with the apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Robertson, and Councillor Marshall has sent his apologies for the first half of the meeting, but he may arrive later.
Okay, and I believe Councillor Smith
and
as well.
Councillor Smith, yes, correct.
Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest for tonight's meeting? No. Okay, so we move quickly on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I will take those as having been read. Does anybody have any items they wish to raise with regard to the meeting? Yes, sorry.
I'll move the minutes. So can I just comment on the work that Andrew Wood did, both on the annual report and the effectiveness of the audit committee? He took our comments away and made them good in terms of both of those items. So I think it would be appropriate to record thanks to him for doing that.
Indeed. So we record those thanks, but also I just wanted to wish Andrew all the best. He's not here this evening due to illness, and we as a committee do wish him a speedy recovery and a quick return to take his place, as I'm sure Anthony does as well. So I will sign those minutes. And we move on to item 4, the annual Treasury Management Report, and invite the Director for Finance, Regulation and Enforcement.
Okay, I'll just walk you through each of the reports, and I'm probably going to get bored of my voice tonight because I'm the only one here to take you through them. So this is one of 3 reports we've been to the committee each year. This particular one looks back and reviews the financial year to see how we performed against the Treasury Management Strategy Statement that was approved by Council in February 2023. Key points I'm going to make was capital expenditure was about just over £7 million underspent, or 67% than the revised approved budget, and that's quite a significant amount of money. But there are some major projects in the capital programme where they're quite difficult and challenging projects. So main ones that underspent the budget were the cinema project, which probably everybody's aware of, the legal complexities and the various parties involved, the land exchange in Baker's Lane, so the swap of the freehold of the shopping centre for the freehold of the units, and the Street A Community Centre. This slippage in the budget is recommended at Cabinet on the 30th of July to be carried forward and added to the budget for 24-25. So the money's not lost, it's just delayed and it gets carried forward to a future financial year. In addition, the capital receipts were lower than the budget. Again, part of that is due to the land exchange. So we are effectively swapping one asset for another. We dispose of one, get a capital receipt, use that to fund the other one. So there's a match there. When the land transfer doesn't happen, we don't get the capital receipt. The other one that's been in there for quite a while that hasn't been completed is the sale of Venture House. Again, we will carry those forward. We're not, at this point, we're not under any impression that they won't happen. They're just delayed. The other point I want to make is capital finance requirement, or effectively the borrowing need. So this is how much do we need to borrow to fund the capital programme, was just under 100,000 lower than we projected in the approved budget. The reason for that was I took the opportunity to use £100,000 of the additional Treasury management income from higher interest rates and the delayed spend to reduce future years' borrowing costs. So that 100,000 will save the council about £5,000 a year moving forward. It's something that we've always looked to do, and I know this committee in its previous iterations wanted us to look at. It seemed like a good opportunity, and if interest rates remain high and we get similar benefits, we might try and do it again this year. Subject to audit, so the top half of the balance sheet, so that's the assets and liabilities, are 5.4 million higher than we anticipated in the budget. probably the first time ever it isn't down to pension valuations. They're quite a small part. The main reasons are the revaluations of our non-current assets are higher than we envisaged. So things like car parks, etc., are higher. And we've got higher investments than we budgeted, mainly due to us having more cash in the bank because we didn't spend as much on the capital programme. On the bottom half of the balance sheet, so that's the equity side, or the reserves as it would be in local government. Again, same figure, 5.4 million higher. That is due to us having higher earmarked reserves and higher unapplied grants and contributions. Again, because we've spent less money, we've used less to fund the capital programme. Council's investments achieved the risk status of A+ compared to the target, and yield exceeded industry benchmarks. We were compliant with all the Treasury limits and prudential indicators for 23-24 that Council approved. So there's nothing to worry about there. The last thing I wanted to just give the committee an update on, we had a discussion about reducing the level of strategic pooled investments at a previous committee from 14 million to 9 million. A, to reduce the risk around that area in a more uncertain world, but B, to give us the 5 million we need to fund the leisure centre for internal borrowing. So we asked Arling Close to have a look at how do we get to the position of doing this in a sustainable way and minimising the capital losses we could incur. What they've recommended is that we play a waiting game, because we don't need to sort this out until 31st of March this year and maybe a little bit beyond. Interest rates are scheduled to reduce during this year. If they reduce, that will have a positive impact on the capital value of the multi-asset funds, because bond yields will be lower, which means the capital value increases. They've recommended also that we retain the £2 million in the property fund, because they think that's a good investment. So the reduction will take place in the 3 diversified or multi-asset funds, and we will keep a watching brief on the interest rates, and they will do to advise us when to reduce. But the positive is that the earmarked reserve we've got to manage the risk of capital valuations exceeds the value of capital losses at the moment. So even if we decide to dispose of them now, there'll be no impact on the council's budget. That's all I wanted to say on that one.
Okay. Just before I open up, just for my purposes, could you define non-current assets?
Yeah.
It's not a phrase I've come across used anywhere else.
So it's a new term for what you probably would be aware of as fixed assets or property, plant and equipment. Right. So it's the things that council owns that give us longer term benefits of buildings, land, vehicles. The big physical things. Yes. Yeah. Okay. It's just a new term that is intended to encompass a wider thing. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I've got one, which might be a rather stupid question, although I'm always told no question is stupid.
Absolutely not.
But watching the news, it was saying that in the next year, 1 in 10 councils will go bust. And in the next 5 years, 5 out of 10 councils will go bust. Now, you can't believe everything you hear on the news, but from what you've just said, do I take it that our council is quite financially secure?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the majority of the councils that are in the risk area of upper tier authorities, the ones that have adult social care, children's services, home to school transport, the demand-led services where the demand and the inflation is outstripping the income that they're generating through council tax, etc. They've used reserves up to fund that or carry them forward. Districts don't have the same pressures, to be honest. One, our demands are lower. We tend to, as a focused around principally homelessness housing, and we're able to raise more income from things like fees, charges for car parking, etc. We have got healthy, so the next report will show you how we compare in terms of our risk. We are quite healthy, especially against our nearest neighbours. So I can't ever say we won't get into difficulty, but you know, from what I can see now and I can project in the next 5x years, I don't think this council will get into difficulty.
So,
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I ask Anthony, I don't want to sort of reveal any sort of confidential decisions, but there has been extra capital put into one of the major projects, and it was discussed in confidential at council, but I was concerned then, and I'm still concerned about transparency for the council taxpayer, but also, I mentioned it at the time, opportunity costs, because money has been gathered together to increase that particular budget. I'd just like to get some reassurances about that. You know, are there any opportunities that are now being missed because of that environment of funds? And you know, it will also incur some revenue costs as well, and whether you can comment on that. Thanks.
Yeah, so it will be revealed in the report that goes to Cabinet on the 30th of July, because the capital programme is in there, so the amounts in there. What we've used to fund the additional spend is money that wasn't built into the base budget for other things. So, as an example, we had some Section 106 sums that the council had received. They are eligible to be used to fund this extra spend, so we've used that to fund the spend. Another big chunk of it was we collected more business rate income in the previous year, mainly due to circumstances beyond our control. So we've got less appeals, less bad debts, we've awarded less relief, so we've got more cash there, and we have a choice, and the choice has been taken to fund the leisure centre. But you are right, with any of these sums of money, Section 106 is a little bit more limited, but there is an opportunity cost that you could use it to fund other priorities that the council has. So I suppose the point I would make is that the choice has been taken to fund the leisure centre.
Didn't mention what it was for.
Anyway, the revenue impact may well be positive from that, not so much negative, because it's some of the things that are being added add to the services and that can be delivered from the centre. That may well have a positive impact. I think we need to get the business case around the leisure centre revisited to reflect the newer design. The business case we've used and built into the base budget is based on the previous design. But I would say, again, as we always do, we always take a very prudent line on what we build into the MTFS for these type of initiatives, because there is risk involved until you've built it and it starts operating, to be honest.
Thanks for that. I mean, in that sense, Section 106 funds, for example, can be used, I understand, it can be used across the district. And there's been a commitment made by the leadership currently that, you know, there will be a fairer distribution of funds available. That it isn't just within the city, it's with Burntwood, Armitage, all of the rural villages, Keith, your patch as well. You know, and I'll keep flagging that up, because unless we start moving towards that sort of equity across the district, you know, that ambition isn't going to be fulfilled. And I'll certainly make sure I'm raising it regularly, as I'm sure you will, Chair, too.
Yes, I can't disagree with you there. I'm not sure I'm going to raise it during this conversation, but definitely I've mentioned it to Councillor Strachan, the Cabinet member, repeatedly. Okay, any further questions in relation to this? No. Okay, so the recommendation is to review the report and issues raised within, and to review the actual prudential indicators contained within the report, which I think we've done. And so I think we can move.
Add to that, Chair, that now it will go on to council to be approved at the next available council meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so we move on to item 5, the SITFA Resilience Index.
So touching nicely on the comment Councillor Vernon made. So this is the 5th release of the SITFA Resilience Index. I get to see a prequel of it before it actually gets publicly released, and I use it as part of my Section 25 report to Council on the robustness of estimates and have we got adequate reserves to manage financial risks. So what it does is it compares indicators of financial stress. So there are 10 indicators for comparison with nearest statistical neighbours. 2 of these are new indicators. That's the more comparable. So in that situation, you're comparing apples with apples. There are also 8 indicators where we compare to all district councils, and whilst we're a district council, that's more like comparing apples with oranges or bananas. So same, we're all fruit, but we're a very different type of fruit. So some will have housing, some will have leisure, some will have, won't charge for car parking, etc. But just if I look on the nearest neighbours, so we're mainly at the lower end of the risk spectrum with just a couple at medium. We've had 3 reductions in the risk level and 1 increase, and the 1 increase is the proportion of the budget that we fund by fees and charges. Now, you might say, well, why would we be medium? Probably one of 2 reasons, probably. One is that we charge for car parking. Not all councils do that, and it's quite a large sum in our budget, about £2 million. And the second one is we collect garden waste subscriptions. Again, not all councils do that, but we also have Tamworth Borough Council sharing our accounts. So it slightly over eggs the amount of fees and charges that come to this council. If we compare to wider district councils, which is a more diverse set of comparators, we've got 5 indicators at medium risk and we have 3 indicators at lower risk. But if I look at all of the indicators and both the comparisons, I don't think there are any concerning issues for this council. But what I would say is the council has approved the use of earmarked reserves to fund place safing activity. So over the next year or 2, we're likely to see our reserve levels reduce. So that's likely to impact on the reserve indicators. And we've also just about to look at replacing the waste fleet with a new fleet funded by a contract hire arrangement, which is a debt type arrangement, and that will likely have an impact on the debt indicators. Now, if we were in a position where we were depleting our reserves through overspends or not delivering savings or poor financial management, I would be more concerned. But the council's taken a choice to use its reserves to fund capital investment. That's not a reactive situation, that's a proactive situation and one that we can manage. So I personally don't think it shows anything that would concern me as a Section 151 officer. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on this item?
I'll make a comment. I mean, that's reassuring there from Anthony, because my puzzlement when I first read the report is, well, where do we actually sit within that family of councils? And you've said, well, our risks are lower on the whole. Of course, we all go to the red lines on the commentary on under 3.6, and there, that first one, the level of reserves will reduce as earmarked reserves are used to fund projects in the capital programme, which goes back to my previous question, really. And I know reserves have been an issue of interest over a long period. Have we got enough? Have we got too little? So just a reassurance, hopefully, that our reserves are absolutely adequate and there won't be significant impacts of that sort of increase in the capital programme on those reserves. We can't keep dipping into reserves, can we? And then under the new debt income ratio, it says because the new waste fleet using contract hire arrangement, which you've highlighted, Anthony, who's going to be owning that particular project? Is it now Councillor Whitehouse in terms of waste and fleet procurement and so on?
Okay. That second one, I am not entirely sure who the.
Yeah, I don't know whether it would be Councillor Strachan as the finance lead or whether it would be Councillor Whitehouse as the waste management
I
lead.
think it's more likely, well, we'll not know, but I think it's more likely to be the portfolio holder that covers waste. That would be my. Normally, Councillor Strachan gets involved in the commissioning side of it, but the project as delivery and management normally sits with the portfolio holder. And just on your point on the reserves, you're right. You get them once, you get the chance to spend them. There was a commitment by council as part of the MTFS to replenish reserves over a period of time. So I've got to look at that in the medium-term financial strategy. But every year, I'm required by law to sign off that I believe the reserves are adequate. If you look where we are in the spectrum, we can reduce our level of reserves, and we would still stay in the low or even medium category. And it's not just a simple case of looking at the reserves and saying, well, we're good, bad. What you need to do is match those against the risks the council's got. So you could be a council that's got very low risk, so you've outsourced a lot of things. Let's say you don't charge for things, whatever. That council may not need high levels of reserves, but conversely, a council that's in a lot of commercial activity, has a lot more financial risks, etc., might need a lot higher level of reserves to manage those risks. So it can be a superficial comparison, but what I think is good about the indicators is it starts the conversation. So people, they start to ask, well, why are we high? Why are we low? What are the reasons? And I think that's good, to be honest. I think that's healthy to have that challenge and that scrutiny.
Yeah, totally agree. It has to be taken in context with the decisions the council has made, and these seem to be a direct consequence of decisions made rather than forces outside of our control. Any more questions on that item? No. So the committee is recommended to note the results, and I think we have so noted. And I move on to item 6, the financial procedure rules. Anthony, so you're back again.
Yeah. So these rules are required both under the section 151 of the Local Act 1972 and the accounts and audit regulations that are prevailing at the time. They're an integral part of the internal financial control framework that the council operates within. So they apply to all employees of the council and LWMTS employees operating on behalf of the council. And if they're not adhered to, ultimately it can result in disciplinary action. So we undertake a regular review of these rules to ensure they reflect best practice, legal requirements and any other changes that go on in the organisation. So on this particular occasion, we've shaded the changes that were recommended in blue in the appendix. This isn't what I'd call a fundamental review. What we're doing here is more of a tidy up. So there are new job titles for people. There are new committee names and roles. Where I would say there is slightly more significant updates is we've now included reference to the new key decision limit and the definition of the key decision. And there's a recommendation to introduce a lower limit for write-offs of up to £250, which would be delegated to the Revenues, Benefits and Corporate Debt Service Manager. The reason that's been recommended is it's in line with other local authorities that have a lower limit for lower debts. It's not really efficient for people like myself to be signing off pennies and pounds, to be honest. The manager of this service is more than capable. She knows better than I do about whether the recovery action's been taken, etc. So my recommendation is we introduce another limit, a lower limit. Anything above the 250 would still come to me and to Councillor Strachan and to Cabinet ultimately. Once these are reviewed by the committee and we make any changes that felt necessary, they will we'll go to council because they're part of the constitution, and we will develop a communication training plan for the officers of the council so they're aware what the changes are. Happy to take any questions.
Just before I open that up, having had a look through these, and again, thank you very much for the highlighting. It does make it so much easier to identify what we're looking at. I completely agree with the introduction of a lower limit for the writing off of debt. My concern would be that if there were to be a large number of consecutive smaller amounts written off, that could be indicative of a larger problem. And I wonder whether it's worth introducing a cumulative ceiling, whether that be quarterly or annual, or whether that be value or simply numbers. Again, not my area of expertise, so I would be willing. I'd be interested on opinions. You know, £1,001 write-offs might be worse than 10 £200 write-offs. Yeah, so yeah, I'd be interested in the council, the officers' thoughts on those.
So I'd be prepared to go away and have a discussion with the corporate debt manager to see what her view of that is. I don't think it will be a problem to do that. So we would probably look at a control of a form and then probably involve Councillor Strachan in signing off if it reaches that ceiling or goes above that ceiling. But let me take that away, speak to the officer. We'll then give you some options or an option and you can have a decision. We can put that into the version that goes to council for approval.
That sounds excellent. Any other points?
No,
Councillor Woodward?
I think your point was very good.
Yeah, so do I, and I think that's a good thing to take away. Just under that £150,000 threshold, can you tell me what the current threshold is, Anthony?
I think we mirror the key decision limit, so I think it's 75 in the current regulations. So what we try and do is, I know it's quite a big jump, but it, as I say, it mirrors the key decision because we're trying not to confuse people with too many limits here. But you know, again, if you've got a view that you think that's too high, we can look at that.
Well, I hadn't thought that it was quite such a big jump. That is a big jump, and you know, perhaps if you take it away and just have a look and discuss with other senior leaders, I'm again slightly concerned about transparency of some of this because we're a very different council from what we were, and in the position of no overall control. It's all very well the leadership, both political and officer leadership, talking to each other about some of these decisions. But, you know, it's a very different shape of council. And I just wonder where, for example, yourself as chair of audit from the Labour group, or myself as opposition leader, or, you know, other members such as Keith, who's part of the controlling group but a backbench member, whether there ought to be some sort of check and balance which involves somebody outside that. You know, it's very, very different from the way it operated before, and you know, much to commend on the way that it's operating now. But you know, I just think there are one or two areas where perhaps some view.
Just for clarity, are you suggesting, because as Anthony suggested, the 150,000 limit on the debt write-off mirrors the key decision limit in A4 on page 4? So are you suggesting an amendment to that, to the key?
To say really, Chair, you know, and I just wonder whether it might be considered, because that is a heck of a jump.
Yeah.
And
just if I may, just over, how long has it been at 75,000? Do you know? I mean, it is a big one-off jump, but if
you remember, Will, because it's a number of years. I mean, I think it's, I've got in my head, it's 5+ years.
Okay.
I don't remember it changing whilst I've been here. I've been here 3 years now, so it could be about 5 years. Yeah.
I think it precedes. I think it precedes the previous council.
Okay, so I mean, you're probably talking a standard yearly inflation of that amount would probably have been to somewhere around 75% anyway. So 100% is possibly not far off the mark for 5 years. But yes, definitely still is a significant jump, and we should.
If it could just be looked at,
Yeah.
and we can get some assurances back about, you know, the rationale behind that increase. But just in the preceding paragraphs around 1.9, 1.10, 1.11, that's where, you know, this issue about a different sort of political makeup of the council, I think, is significant. You know, what I don't want, and I'm sure it doesn't happen, is some sort of groupthink which leaves opposition members who outnumber the controlling group, you know, finding out after the event almost. So I'd just like some sort of reflection from the leadership team about whether some involvement from someone outside the controlling group might be useful, or inside as a backbencher, just checking on that.
Leave that with me, and we can go away. I mean, if we, for instance, we hit a threshold or a transaction level, whether we involve the chair of the audit committee to something along those lines. But let me take that away, see what we can come up with.
That sounds good. Any further items on the financial procedures?
We've got to recommend that the full
Yes.
council
Yeah.
adopt them. I'm not sure when that full council will be in light of those. October. Oh gosh, there's plenty of time then for perhaps Anthony to get back to us with some of those queries and responses to them. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, as you say, if there's no further items, we note the content of the report, provided our reviews, and we recommend to council subject to the amendments that we've yet to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick show, a quick show of all three hands. Thank you very much. And we move on to the internal audit progress report.
Yeah, so I'm not quite as expert in these areas, but I will do my best. Any questions I can't answer on the evening, I'll take away and Andrew will provide a response. So the points Andrew wanted me to make was the audit needs assessment has been undertaken for the ICT area of the, I think Andrew gave the commitment that we'd come back on that. I think it was 40 days set aside. So the auditor has made the assessment, and the areas he believes that we should focus on from a risk perspective are cyber incident preparedness response, the identity and access management systems, and the revenues and benefits IT application is the single biggest system we've got that collects the most money and pays out the most money for the council, and IT asset management. So those will be built into the plan. Other points Andrew wants to make. So we've completed in the first 3 months of the 19% of the plan if you do it on a linear profile. That's compared to a planned budgeted profile of 13%. So I think for the last couple of years we've always been behind the first quarter. Mixture of reasons to do with illness, new contractors starting, other challenges in the organisation around managers, etc. So that's quite pleasing that we're actually ahead of the curve. All the audits that have been completed have provided reasonable assurance levels, so there is no limited or no assurance. There are 3 IT audits where we're waiting confirmation of the timings of the audits, so they're in as to be determined in the plan. But what Andrew's looking to do is once he gets confirmation of the timings, he's looking to spread that equally over the plan period, so it's not disproportionate in one area or another, because a lot of this will impact on the IT team. One has been completed in quarter1, and he's just waiting on final agreement to confirm which individual audits will be completed in each quarter. He continues to maintain the satisfaction levels with the service, so the questionnaires they receive. They have missed some of their KPIs, but that's because they're focusing on completing audits. So some of the ones where they have to have a meeting within so many days or they issue a report within so many days, they're letting them lapse a little bit so they can get through to complete the audit effectively. They are monitoring the audit recommendations. The number of high priority recommendations has decreased slightly with implementation. Medium and low priority however have increased, but that's because they've done new audits in quarter1 which have added to that. So there'll always be a position where there'll be some taken out as managers action and more they're no longer relevant, but they will be refreshed when new audits are done with recommendations. There are 9 high priority recommendations following the review of the DWP searchlight issue, which did come to the committee previously. They're currently undertaking a follow-up review for that area. Once they've been provided with the satisfactory evidence and they've confirmed that that does address the recommendations that were made, they'll then look to remove those from the list of recommendations, and that's quite a chunk of the high priority recommendations. I think that's probably as much as I wanted to say on that one, but again, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see the number of high priority recommendations particularly fall, particularly as we know, hopefully, we've got those 9 that will disappear once once they've been addressed. 114 outstanding recommendations is still, to my mind, quite a lot. And I have, in discussion with Andrew around those, and in item 10 of this evening's agenda, I will be recommending that we start talking to managers directly about those, but we'll leave it to item 10 to discuss how we do that. Any other items? So
Just to comment, I was going to raise that same issue. We've said on a number of occasions that as far as internal audit is concerned, we're happy to call managers, heads of service in to explain why those recommendations are still outstanding. So I think it's important that we do reiterate that. But it says it all for me in 3.3 that that we're doing really well, a significant improvement on the previous year and audit. So I'm certainly reassured that things are progressing well. Hope other members are.
Yeah, as it's unfortunate Andrew wasn't able to join us, but I did have an opportunity to discuss the current position with him before he was taken ill. So with any other issues, if not, then we have so noted the internal audit, the audit annual report, and move on to the next item.
So this one is a report Andrew brings periodically. I think it's annually to the committee, but there are updates that come through the year. Basically, it talks around internal audits compliance with public sector internal audit standards. So they are the benchmark that an internal audit team works to around processes, the work they do, the procedures, the quality, etc. Andrew's also presenting the internal audits quality assurance and improvement programme for 24-25, and he gives a little bit of an update on the final situation on the agreed external quality assurance action plan 23-24. So the point Andrew wanted me to make was fully implemented all of the recommendations and improvements around the external quality assurance plan 23-24. They are now compliant fully with the public sector internal audit standards. That's in Appendix 1. He's also incorporated the findings of that review into this year's quality assurance and improvement programme. So we've taken the learning and the changes and we built it into what we do going forward. He also wanted me to say, and this is probably a key point looking forward, and I think he might have mentioned this previously, those internal audit standards are being reviewed at the moment globally. I think in America, I think he said originally. So from the 9th of January 2024, they're looking to implement them fully following year, 9th of January 2025. For the UK public sector, it's the extension period or the implementation period has been extended to the 1st of April 2025. So we've got 3 more months. What he wants to say, and I think he said this previously though, it brings the standards in line with financial years, which is good. But they're quite onerous from what he said previously. So at the moment, UK professional bodies, SITFA, Institute of Internal Auditors, are mapping those new standards to the needs of the public sector. So are they appropriate? Are they proportionate? That's intended to be completed around September, October this year for consultation with internal audit teams. Once that's been received, Andrew intends reporting that to committees and others as to what's been talked about and potentially what our consultation response will be. And he will make an assessment of the areas where we potentially don't comply with the new standards to do sort of an improvement plan or an action plan to achieve that. he's hoping to get everything ready by the end of March 2025, so that we are hit the ground running from the 1st of April. I think there's probably quite a lot to be done at the moment around the consultation and the development of them, because they do appear very onerous from what he said previously, and I'm not convinced they are necessarily applicable as they are written to the public sector.
Yeah.
Happy to take any questions and feed them back to Andrew.
So with regard to our current compliance, I noted glibly before the meeting started that if everything is working perfectly, these meetings should be short, because there's very little for us to discuss, and I'm heartened to see 100% ratings across here and all the green ticks on the report. So it leaves me personally with very little to raise. Anything from Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when I was first reading the report, I saw it's in 3.3 that we're generally conforming to the standards, and I think, oh gosh, that's damned by faint praise. And then later on page 122, it says pretty much that that's the highest standard that you can get anyway. So, you know, generally conforming is a bit more than satisfactory. So that's good news. Just right at the end of the appendices there, Andrew's put down some suggested enhancements, which is presumably what you're talking about, Anthony, going out to various consultations. They all seem eminently sensible, but subject to capacity, time, you know, other factors that might come in. But, you know, I think I would say, yes, I'm sure we could endorse those different enhancements to be brought forward as soon as they can.
Yeah, and on your other point, having worked with internal and external auditors over many years, the wording they use doesn't actually convey how
Doesn't set the heartbeat in, does it?
it's very it's nondescript in some respects, or very generic, and you know, you can be very, very good and you just achieve the minimum in a lot of cases.
Okay, and so we are asked to note the internal audit's compliance with PCS, IAS, QAIP, and external quality assessment action plan. I think we have noted that, and so I move on to the next item, risk management update, and once again we ask Anthony to step in Andrew's stead.
So we bring the strategic risk register risk update to audit committee quite regularly, because it is quite an important document. This particular risk register was reviewed and discussed at leadership team on the 3rd of July, and it's detailed in the appendix. Andrew has updated it based on the discussions that took place at that meeting. He's indicated changes in the risk register in yellow. The one major change that was made was and I think it might have been to the committee before, we added a new strategic risk SRA, which is related to the withdrawal of the local plan 2040, because that does have quite strategic implications for the council. There are 7 strategic risks. All of them at the moment are scored as material in risk. None are scored as severe. So they are above our risk appetite, or shown in the red area of the matrix. Kerry's asked me to mention that on one of them, that I think it's the cyber security one, we mentioned about public service network accreditation. We've now submitted that application. We commenced in the 1st of July, and now we're waiting for a response. But to date, they haven't raised any queries or comments. So you can take that as no news is good news. It would be useful to get that accreditation though, because it's a feather in the cap around how good our network is and our security. We've got 3 strategic projects that are moving to the delivery stage, and therefore I think it's good practice to bring those to the audit committee because of the risk they potentially present. 2 of those are scored as material, with 1, which is the leisure centre, now scored as tolerable. I think that was material. It might have even been severe previously. That was down to the fact of the point Councillor Woodward made earlier, that we didn't have sufficient funding to deliver the leisure centre that the council wanted to deliver. That money has now been approved, so that risk has reduced. The current risk appetite of the council is based on the previous strategic plan, and it excludes initiatives where the risk would be assessed as being in the red area of the matrix. Simon has made the point, and it is a good point to make, that within the approval of the new strategic plan, Lichfield District 2050, it would be beneficial to have a look at whether that risk appetite still remains right for the council in light of what it's seeking to do. And therefore he's proposed that a report comes to the audit committee at some future meeting, just to seek the views of the committee and around that. So I'm happy to take any questions around that risk update.
I think it would be useful to have that risk appetite review come before the committee, hopefully one with a more auspicious date with a larger attendance. Because I think it's I think it's one that's due some wider review. Any points on that item?
Just make a general point, if I can, Chair. You know, the landscape for local government is changing very quickly at the moment, and there may be some associated risk that, you know, the withdrawal of the previous local plan and the setting of a new local plan, that might be seen as an opportunity. It's also a challenge. So, you know, in terms of appetite for risk, there are going to be associated risks around that. The same with any devolution deal that might emerge. So, you know, sort of keeping an eye on that sort of changing landscape and changing sort of legislation as it goes forward, that needs to be sort of factored in. I don't think it would fit into one of those tiles, but it's something that we've got to be aware of, I think.
Okay.
I mean, just going to say that, I mean, even just on the finance one, despite the fact we seem to have been living in an uncertain world for I don't know how many years, single year, the new government's committed to look at multi-year funding settlements, ending the bidding process for funding pots. They're all beneficial, but then we've got potentially the replacement of the business rates and what comes there. So who knows what that's going to be, but that does add a level of uncertainty. I doubt it will be in the first year, but who knows? And I don't quite fully understand what the replacement would be, because it feels like it's a land value tax of some form, but then there is mention of it being equalising with online retailers and things, and at the moment I can't envisage in my mind how that would work, given you've got one based on capital values and one based on transaction levels. But you know, we'll see.
I think for tonight we note the uncertainty, the uncertainty that creates, and hope that the outcome is significantly better for us and for businesses locally. Okay, so we are asked to note the risk management update and to receive the assurances on actions taking place to manage the council's most significant strategic and project risks, and I think we have done so, which takes us on to item 10 of the agenda, the work programme. I think as we've discussed in previous meetings of this committee, it is a pretty much a fait accompli, this work programme, driven by the dates by which each of these reports are required. However, as I mentioned, one of the things I would like to do is to start to talk to managers throughout the council, I was going to say the business, throughout the council, about the outstanding audit recommendations within their areas, and I think we can tailor that around the work programme. So potentially we ask managers with who are likely to require longer to discuss their outstanding work recommendations. We invite those to meetings with a smaller work programme. I was hoping if Andrew had been here that he could have provided us with a an overview or some kind of guidance as to who might be best for us to first speak to. I'm keen that asking managers to come to the meeting to discuss these items is not doesn't create an extra layer of stress or worry. I'm sure they've all got enough on their plates to deal with already, but I think it would serve the council and those managers well for them to just bear in mind that they might be asked and to give it some thought. If an audit recommendation is no longer relevant, but in their view, that's as important to know as to any reason why they may not have reached the or implemented the recommendation. In Andrew's absence, I wonder if I could ask the committee to authorise myself as chair, Councillor Marshall as vice, and Will as the committee clerk, and sorry, I forgot your governing officer, to discuss with Andrew when he's back as to who might be the best manager to invite to our next meeting at the 18th of September. So
Yeah, and I think that's a really good idea, and we've talked about it, but haven't done it yet. So yes. I think that sort of puts some meat on the bones. I mean, it might be useful, I don't know, for you to consider, rather than bringing managers to an after-hours meeting, it might be possible for, you know, a number of us to meet in the daytime, more privately. That's something for you to consider, Chair. But you know, that we can be flexible in that respect, so that we're not keeping people on after their day's work has ended, but we can do it within hours if it's all possible.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I say, I'm keen that managers are aware that we would like to discuss them with them and to collaborate with them to reduce these outstanding items, whether that means because we can provide pressure for resources, or you know, or indeed remove these outstanding recommendations if they're no longer relevant. So, but I equally I don't want to be an extra burden on already busy staff. So yeah, I'm keen to get something going before the next meeting. So perhaps if I work with Andrew to have a manager at the next meeting, somebody who is familiar with the processes of attending a committee and speaking to us, and we can also put an item on the agenda as to how we then take that forward, what format that takes, whether that's a subcommittee who might be available to discuss with managers during the working hours. Would everybody be happy with that? Okay, thank you. Any other items on the work programme? Oh, sorry.
So I just suggest to Will, and you might just want to touch base with the external auditors. We've got the statement of accounts for 23-24 scheduled for the 26th of November meeting. You might be able to get that to the 18th of September meeting. You probably just need to clarify that with them, because the deadline for signing off is the 30th of September. I think assets have got a target to get their clients signed off by that deadline. That would be a more relevant committee to take the accounts to, but it really depends on whether they're confident enough to do that, to be honest.
It's probably on that later committee as a sort of hangover from previously where it had been pushed back. So yeah, we can potentially bring that forward if they're happy with that.
And it's probably a better meeting because there's not so much on the agenda for that meeting. And that, I think they've put their audit findings and auditors annual report for that meeting, so they should really be all on the same committee. But you just need to check with them that they're comfortable to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Yep, to bring that forward seems like an appropriate thing to do, and ask you to if we can. Okay, and I think that brings tonight's meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.